Around 1 in the morning, shrouded in a dense veil of fog, the royal motorcade appeared. 3 luxury vehicles, painted a deep black, moved with subdued headlights, their powerful engines emitting only a faint hum, like the whisper of a secret encompassing the unfolding events. In the central car, amidst the opulent interior, sat Queen Camilla. Her figure was silent, wrapped in a soft gray cashmere shawl, her face hidden behind a silk scarf. The car moved slowly but steadily towards a private airfield nestled in the picturesque Scottish Highlands, where a waiting aircraft was already prepared for departure. To casual observers, this might have seemed like a routine, unremarkable royal transfer. However, for those privy to the secrets of palace life, it represented something entirely different, a true escape. Just a few hours earlier, unsettling news had reached the majestic Buckingham Palace. Something had been discovered at Raymill House, Camilla's private estate in Wiltshire. What began as a routine plumbing repair had unexpectedly led to the unearthing of a hidden vault, located deep beneath the building's foundation. This vault contained royal documents and artifacts that, according to unspoken rules, were never meant to see the light of day again. Within minutes, the royal telephone exchange was inundated with calls. Words like breach, containment, and exposure echoed through every corridor of the palace, signaling an impending storm. By midnight, Camilla was no longer in the capital. At the airfield, where an atmosphere of tense anticipation hung heavy, the pilot checked his watch once more. Camilla's assistant handed over a sealed folder, bearing the inscription, "Personal Transit, Lisbon." The Queen Consort hesitated for a moment, casting a final glance at the car door before stepping into the biting night air. Her shoes clicked distinctly on the wet concrete, each step seemingly slower than the last, as if she were trying to prolong the inevitable. For the first time in her reign, there were no intrusive photographers, no extensive security detail, no cheering crowds, only the whistling wind in her ears, and the stark realization that she was leaving the kingdom she had helped to rule. Some claimed she was fleeing a brewing scandal that could shake the foundations of the monarchy. Others whispered that she was trying to protect someone she genuinely loved. But one truth remained undeniable. The monarchy was about to face its darkest dawn in decades, portending an era of profound change and upheaval. 2 days before this attempted escape, an unusual atmosphere of unease permeated Wiltshire. A late autumn wind swept across the countryside, scattering fallen leaves across the courtyard of Raymill House, the Queen Consort's quiet sanctuary, far from the gilded gossip and intrigues of London. To the outside world, it was merely Camilla's country home, modest compared to the grandeur of Buckingham Palace, cozy, filled with the barking of dogs and the cheerful laughter of grandchildren. Yet, beneath these walls lay a secret that even her closest staff did not fully comprehend. That morning, a local contractor named Peter Harland arrived to inspect a persistent leak near the building's west wing. He had performed odd jobs there for years, mending tiles, trimming hedges, repairing pipes, and he always described the place as strangely quiet, as if the house itself was listening. As he followed the trail of water into the pantry, his flashlight beam fell upon something odd, a section of wall that clearly differed from the surrounding masonry. The bricks were newer, tighter, and laid in a perfectly even rectangular outline. Thinking it might be a hidden service panel, he tapped on it. The response was a dull, hollow sound. After a few careful strikes with a wrench, a brick loosened, revealing a strip of metal behind it, cold, matte steel, which turned out to be a door. Moments later, Harland called his supervisor, who, in turn, contacted the palace maintenance service, which then notified royal security. Within an hour, unmarked cars drove into Raymill, and the area was cordoned off. Harland was quietly escorted from the premises and asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement. By nightfall, all information regarding the leak had vanished from official records. What happened next was later described by one insider as the eeriest moment in the estate's history. 2 royal investigators descended into the basement, forced open the steel door, and discovered a chamber roughly the size of a small study. Inside were wooden crates, neatly stacked against the walls, some bearing royal insignia from the 1950s, others unmarked but tightly sealed. In the center, beneath a thick linen cloth, stood a single black, unadorned box, secured with a gold clasp engraved with the initials ER. When the cloth was removed, the air in the room seemed to shift, becoming denser and more tense. One of the investigators, an archivist well-versed in royal symbols, visibly paled. The markings, he later confided to a friend, corresponded to items listed in the Crown's secret military archive. An inventory so highly classified that even members of the royal family were forbidden access. What these files were doing in Camilla's basement, no one dared to ask aloud, but the question hung invisibly in the air. Late that evening, an encrypted message was sent to Buckingham Palace, succinctly stating, "Vault confirmed. Object secured. Awaiting instructions." Less than half an hour later, palace aides conveyed that the Queen Consort had personally expressed a desire to oversee the transportation of the discovered materials to London. However, this request was denied. Instead, an immediate order for a discreet lockdown of Raymill followed, and all communications at the estate were intercepted. The following morning, Camilla personally arrived at the estate. Witnesses described her as outwardly composed, yet her hands trembled visibly as she held a key that perfectly fit the golden clasp. "Seal it again," she commanded the staff, her voice firm despite the circumstances. "No one is to enter." But by then, the damage was already done. One staff member, overcome with fear by what they had seen, had already shared a sensational story with a journalist in Bath. By the time palace officials traced the call, a single sentence had appeared online. "Secret vault discovered under the Queen Consort's home." This message was deleted within minutes, but a screenshot had already begun its rapid spread. By midnight, rumors reached Downing Street, and just before dawn, a flight plan was registered at Gatwick under a diplomatic pseudonym. The royal family had certainly faced scandals before, but never one that originated literally from beneath their own foundations. For what was buried beneath Raymill was not merely a historical find. It was a colossal responsibility, and for the first time in decades, it had awakened. The day after this stunning discovery, the royal court was palpably trembling with tension. Just hours after the news leaked online, every major London newspaper picked up the story, though none dared to print specific names. Headlines danced circuitously around the truth. Secret documents found on royal property. Unexplained artifacts linked to the crown. A suffocating atmosphere permeated Buckingham Palace. King Charles silently read the morning briefings, his face unusually pale in the new day's light. Princess Anne was already present, arms crossed, her jaw tightly clenched. "If this is true," she sharply stated, "then we have lost control of our own history." Charles did not reply. He simply stared intently at the page. Somewhere behind those weary eyes, the monarch in him calculated the consequences, while the man in him seemed to be breaking. Camilla, meanwhile, was confined to Raymill. Her phone had been confiscated, and her usual staff replaced by palace security. Officially, she was assisting with internal investigations. Unofficially, she was under house arrest. According to one aide, she spent the first 12 hours pacing the garden, chain-smoking and whispering to herself, "This was not supposed to be found." The investigation deepened rapidly. A secret council of 5 members was formed, each sworn to secrecy. Among them was Sergeant Evelyn Brant, the same guard who had discovered the Cullinan diamonds months earlier. He was again brought in to secure the Raymill vault. As he descended the steps that evening, the air felt colder than he remembered. "You could feel the weight of ghosts in there," he later said in a private interview, recalling his sensations. Inside the chamber, the team methodically catalogued each item. Most boxes contained files typed in archaic fonts, marked Windsor Internal Memos, 1940 to 1958. Others held velvet pouches filled with insignias and medallions linked to long-forgotten royal orders. But the black box, the one engraved ER, remained the focal point. It was heavier than expected. When it was opened, a single item lay within, a faded diary, its pages brittle and yellowed with age. The first line was written in an ornate, elegant hand. "For my heir's eyes only," and the signature was unmistakably Elizabeth R. To this day, no one outside the secret council knows exactly what was written in that diary. However, rumors began to circulate that it contained confessions, a personal account of royal decisions made during the late Queen's reign that were never intended for public record. One of these alleged entries, it was claimed, mentioned the night everything changed, referring to a conversation with a young Charles decades ago. By midweek, news of the vault's discovery had transformed from idle rumor into a full-blown royal crisis. Parliament urgently demanded comprehensive explanations, while the press, in turn, craved absolute transparency. The monarchy found itself once again on the defensive, and this time, the crown's usual tools, silence and ceremonial rituals, proved utterly insufficient. Within the walls of Raymil, Camilla plunged into deep despair. Her closest friends later recalled that she pleaded for a meeting with Charles, but each of her requests was invariably rejected. For the first time since her marriage, the Queen Consort found herself completely detached from the circle of power she had once so confidently navigated. As night fell, an emergency phone call came from the palace. In Wiltshire, a car under diplomatic code was being urgently prepared for departure. The license plate was carefully concealed from prying eyes. Lisbon was indicated as the destination. The royal pilot received orders to depart precisely at midnight. Notably, the request did not come from the king's office, but originated from someone on the Queen Consort's personal staff. By the time palace intelligence managed to track its movements, it was irrevocably too late. CCTV cameras captured the motorcade confidently heading north, towards the private airfield. In the back seat, a solitary figure could be discerned, wrapped in a gray shawl, head bowed and face obscured. For decades, the monarchy had endured countless scandals, leaks, and betrayals. But this situation was fundamentally different. This was not a newspaper fabrication, not a lover, not idle gossip. This was the Queen herself, fleeing her own kingdom. And as dawn approached, the question was no longer what exactly had been found beneath Raymil House, but whether the monarchy itself could withstand the upheavals that would inevitably follow. However, the motorcade never reached the airfield. Before dawn, an emergency order, issued directly from Buckingham Palace, redirected the king's security to intercept the fugitives. At precisely 4:10 a.m., 2 Range Rovers decisively blocked the narrow road leading to the Highland airfield. In the back seat of the lead car, Queen Camilla froze as the bright headlights suddenly fell upon her. The door swung open, and Princess Anne appeared, dressed not for a ceremonial occasion, but in a trench coat and boots, her face seemingly carved from iron. "Turn off the engine," she commanded the driver. Her voice did not rise, but it carried such incredible weight that everyone around instantly fell silent. The guards immediately complied. Anne opened the rear door and looked directly at her sister-in-law. "You're not going anywhere." Camilla tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. For a moment, they were just 2 women standing in the morning fog. No titles, no hierarchy, just years of unspoken resentment hanging between them. Then Anne leaned closer. "If you leave tonight, you will destroy what little honor this family has left. Is that what you want?" Camilla's hands trembled. "You don't understand," she whispered. "They will come for me when they read it. The diary." Anne's eyes narrowed. "Then perhaps you should have left it buried." The tension only subsided when the king's car arrived. Charles slowly emerged, looking older than his years, rain dripping from his coat. At first he did not speak. He simply looked at Camilla, the woman who had stood by him through a succession of scandals and trials, and then at Anne, the sister who had become his steadfast shield. "Enough," he finally said. "This ends here." Camilla lowered her gaze. "You cannot stop what's coming." "No," Charles replied softly. "But I can choose how we meet it." The following hours unfolded within the ancient stone walls of Windsor Castle. A private council was convened, attended by Charles, Anne, William, and the Lord Chamberlain. Camilla was escorted to the green drawing room, where she waited under guard. The air was thick with unspoken words and heavy thoughts. William arrived last. His face was pale, his eyes red from unbearable fatigue. He had spent the night poring over the archives retrieved from Raymill, the sealed crates, the enigmatic black box, and the diary itself. If the public ever sees this, he quietly told his father, we lose them. Not just her, all of us. Anne crossed her arms. Then we'll make sure they never do. But William shook his head. Cover-ups don't work anymore. The world has changed. Every secret eventually leaks. Charles rubbed his temples, trying to quell a headache. So what do you want me to do, William? Banish my wife? Confess to a parliament that doesn't even want the monarchy to exist? Tell the truth, William stated firmly. Or at least some version of it that sounds like the truth. Outside, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the horizon, as if foreshadowing imminent upheaval. Reporters were already crowding the castle's majestic gates, their journalistic instincts unerringly predicting the drama brewing within. In the sky, at a respectful distance, helicopters hovered, their searchlights piercing the morning rain, creating a mystical shimmer. Finally, Camilla was escorted to the council. Her measured, clear steps echoed across the polished marble floor as she entered, her shawl still damp from the morning fog. She did not wait for questions, going straight to the point. The vault is not what you imagine, she began, her voice firm despite the circumstances. This was not an act of theft or part of any conspiracy. It was preservation. Elizabeth desired these records to be kept away from official documents, away from the influence of politicians who might distort them for their own ends. She once confided in me that the truth sometimes needs to remain hidden until the world is truly ready to accept it. Anne, not bothering to hide her skepticism, scoffed. And who decides when the world is ready? You? Camilla's composure, until this moment impeccable, visibly faltered. I sought to protect her legacy, not destroy it. Charles, watching her, pierced her with a long, attentive gaze. And yet you nearly destroyed mine. The silence that followed these words was almost unbearable, its weight pressing down on all present. Rain methodically drummed against the stained glass windows, creating a rhythm like the impatient ticking of a clock. Finally, William broke the silence. We cannot undo what has already been discovered, but we can choose the path of transparency. The diary remains sealed. All other materials will go to the archives. No more lies. Anne, after a slight pause, nodded, presenting her condition. On one condition. Raymill is no longer under her control. Camilla's eyes widened in shock. You can't. It's not punishment, he calmly replied. It's containment. Charles gave his reluctant consent. For the good of the institution, he murmured, though his voice visibly trembled, betraying inner turmoil. By midday, the decision was finally affirmed. The contents of the vault were transported to Windsor's underground archive, under vigilant escort by security and a team of historians. Officially, the palace released a concise statement. A historical collection from Raymill House has been secured for preservation under royal oversight. Unofficially, it was a tacit acknowledgement that the monarchy had once again managed to mend its wounds behind closed doors, concealing them from prying eyes. As the motorcade left Raymill for the last time, Camilla watched it from a castle window. The cars gradually disappeared into the thick fog, carrying away the last remnants of the secret she had so desperately tried to preserve. In her hand, she clutched a single torn page from the late Queen's diary, the one line she could not bring herself to destroy. Those who keep the truth will one day have to face it. That night, silence returned to Windsor, but in that silence, everyone there felt that something fundamental had changed. The crown had survived another storm, but at the cost of another piece of its soul. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the clouds slowly began to dissipate over the majestic castle towers. Dawn was approaching, yet it brought no sense of relief. It felt like a sentence awaiting pronouncement. By the next sunrise, the royal crisis, like a wildfire, had spread beyond the walls of Windsor. What began as a faint whisper in Wiltshire now raged across global headlines, capturing public attention. Queen Camilla questioned over secret archive. Hidden vault found at Raymill House. Royal documents seized by emergency decree. Within hours, news vans swarmed the castle gates, their antennas piercing the morning fog like bayonets of insatiable curiosity. The palace's public statement, cold, minimalist, and meticulously polished, only added fuel to the fire. Reporters from Paris to Sydney meticulously dissected every word, analyzing not so much what it said, but what it left unsaid. There was no denial, merely clarification, no apology, just reorganization. Even the BBC, usually extremely cautious in royal affairs, aired a special panel discussion intriguingly titled, "Secrets of the Crown, What's in the Vault?" Outside the palace, crowds began to gather. Some carried placards demanding the truth, their voices merging into a single chorus. Others waved British flags, expressing support for the Queen. The front line of the monarchy's image war had shifted from closed corridors to open pavements. Inside the palace, however, the tension had become intensely personal. Charles categorically refused to make a public appearance, delegating all communication to the Lord Chamberlain. William once again urged transparency, warning that in the absence of honesty, the public would inevitably write its own, possibly distorted story. Anne, ever pragmatic, argued that survival demanded silence, not confessions that could cause harm. Camilla remained at Windsor under quiet but watchful observation. For 2 days, she neither ate nor slept properly. Palace staff described her as haggard, pacing the halls as if awaiting a verdict that never came. She no longer argued. She no longer defended herself. She simply watched television reports in silence, her reflection superimposed over her own image on the screen. The Queen had become a global scandal, one that now shook the foundations not only of the royal family, but of the entire nation. The outside world, meanwhile, observed a growing societal rift. Virtual forums buzzed with a torrent of theories, some wildly improbable, others surprisingly plausible. The public wondered, was this mysterious vault connected to military intelligence? Did it contain hidden letters from the abdication era, or something far more sinister? Perhaps it held documents revealing financial ties extending far beyond the British Isles. There were no answers, and it was this uncertainty that bred anxiety. The monarchy had always relied on an aura of mystique, but in the digital age, that mystique could too easily be interpreted as outright deception. By the 3rd day, the wave of protests reached the palace gates. Across the square, the slogan, "Truth before tradition," echoed. The phrase instantly trended on social media, accompanied by archival photographs of the late Queen Elizabeth II with captions like, "She would never have allowed this." That same night, His Majesty the King finally broke his silence. His address was brief, just 3 minutes, recorded in a single take. The monarch's face was etched with exhaustion, and his voice, though low, was crystal clear. "The crown endures through the unwavering principles of honesty and duty," he stated. "There are times when truth may disturb us, but it must never divide us. The monarchy stands not above history, but within it, an integral part." This statement contained no direct admission, yet it wasn't a complete denial. For the first time in decades, a member of the royal family openly acknowledged the fragility of truth itself. Public reaction was roughly split. Some praised his humility and openness. Others viewed it as an evasive response, an attempt to avoid direct responsibility. Opinion polls showed trust in the monarchy had fallen to its lowest level since the tragic events surrounding Princess Diana. International media drew parallels between this scandal and the so-called Cambridge Papers, as well as long-standing disputes over previous generations' royal wills. Meanwhile, deep within the castle, a less public drama unfolded. Queen Camilla requested a private meeting with Charles. Witnesses claimed their conversation lasted only 15 minutes. At its conclusion, she handed him a wax-sealed envelope. No one knows what exactly it contained, but one aide swore he heard her say, "I loved you enough to hide what would break you." The next morning, Queen Camilla's car discreetly left Windsor. No press statements, no disclosure of her final destination. The only detail confirmed by flight tracking data was that a small private jet departed from Aberdeen hours later, bound for Vienna, a city known for its neutrality and the strict confidentiality of its archives. For the general public, this departure marked an unsettling calm. For the monarchy, however, it heralded the beginning of a new, even darker chapter in its history. For the first time in months, complete silence reigned at Windsor. Journalists' cameras vanished, protesting crowds dispersed, and the atmosphere of constant panic seemed to dissolve into something even more oppressive. A profound sense of regret. The monarchy, as always, endured, but its cost lingered in every palace corridor, like the faint scent of smoke after a fire. Queen Camilla's absence was officially explained as a period of private reflection abroad. In truth, no one in the palace dared to utter her name aloud. Staff referred to her by the code name, the Consort, and press secretaries diligently rehearsed neutral answers to the inevitable questions from the public and the media. A handful of insiders whispered that she had settled in a remote villa near Vienna, protected by British security services and maintaining complete anonymity. There were no photographs, no public appearances, not even rumors of her return flight. For Charles, this silence was both a shield and a heavy punishment. He performed his royal duties with the precision of a clockwork mechanism, greeting ambassadors, attending briefings, delivering speeches on renewal and duty, while his eyes betrayed a profound weariness. Princess Anne took charge of internal family affairs, overseeing a meticulous review of the Riamil archives, now sealed by royal decree. Prince William, meanwhile, became the public face of recovery, attending youth forums and environmental summits with a tone that combined humility and quiet determination. The monarchy was slowly but surely rebuilding its image, one smile at a time. But beneath the apparent calm, an invisible wound refused to heal. Of those who had seen the contents of the Riamil vault, no one spoke of it again. Sergeant Evelyn Brant, tasked with transporting the sealed files to the Windsor archive, quietly resigned shortly thereafter. A journalist later tracked him to a cottage near Cornwall, where he refused all interviews but left one single message. Some truths are meant to rest, even if they still breathe. The nation's attention instantly shifted, a common phenomenon in public life. A new scandal, this time distinctly political, captured the public interest. However, the few who bothered to look closer noticed subtle but significant changes in the royal mechanism. A completely new policy was introduced, mandating the publication of certain categories of royal expenditures that had previously remained obscure. Historical archives, until recently inaccessible to researchers and the general public, gradually began to open, providing access to valuable documents. Thus, transparency, the principle William had so actively advocated, began to steadily take root within the system, penetrating its deepest reaches. And yet, for every door that opened to greater candor, another remained tightly locked. The Riamil vault, shrouded in mystery, was not included in these new transparency reforms. Its existence was carefully classified in official documents, which were marked with the terse but intriguing phrase, "Estate anomaly, classified." Even the keeper of the royal collection, ostensibly a person with access to all the monarchy's treasures, claimed to have no means of entering this enigmatic vault. One night, exactly 6 weeks after the scandal erupted, Charles was seen walking alone through the picturesque gardens of Windsor. One of his aides followed him at a respectful distance, careful not to disturb his solitude. The monarch stopped under a mighty old oak and gazed up at the sky. It was gray, perfectly cloudless, and strikingly still. "She was right," he murmured almost inaudibly, as if to himself. "We cannot hide from time." These deeply meaningful words would never appear in any official press release, but they quietly echoed among the few who heard them. For deep down, even within the ancient and unwavering walls of the monarchy, there was a growing realization that nothing can remain buried forever, neither truth, nor guilt, nor even the strongest love. By the end of November, Camilla sent a handwritten letter to Clarence House. It was surprisingly short, formal in tone, and signed simply with a single initial, C. The palace, following its long-standing tradition, never disclosed the contents of this message, but insiders from her closest circle hinted that it spoke of a conclusion, a withdrawal for the greater good of the institution of the monarchy. And so, Britain gradually adapted to its new rhythm of life. A king entirely focused on his duty to the nation, an heir diligently preparing for future rule, and a consort who gently and imperceptibly vanished from the pages of history. However, there remained those who still agonized over the question: what exactly was discovered beneath Riamil House? What could have compelled a queen to flee her own kingdom, and a king to forever seal his wife's secret? Perhaps the answer to these questions still awaits its moment, silent and patient, behind that securely locked door. Time, strangely enough, possesses an astonishing ability to soften even the sharpest and most painful scandals. Months after the storm surrounding Riamil, the world moved on, but the echo of that mysterious vault and the queen who so desperately tried to escape her own truth lingered in the air, like a faint whisper on the British wind. What initially appeared to be a simple story of hidden files gradually transformed into something far more profound and human. It became a vivid reminder that power and secrecy rarely coexist for long in the same space. Ultimately, Queen Camilla's name was quietly restored in public records, yet her physical presence never returned. Her portrait now hangs in one of Windsor's lesser galleries, elegant yet detached. It serves as a symbol of loyalty complicated by ambition. The official version of events refers to it all as an unfortunate misunderstanding. However, those who remember the long and anxious nights of October 2025 know the true underlying story. The Riamil vault may be sealed, but what it symbolizes, the clash between truth and tradition, remains wide open for reflection. In this lies an important lesson. Regardless of whether you rule an entire kingdom or simply manage your own life, truth does not disappear just because you turn away from it. The harder we try to contain it, the louder it finds ways to manifest and speak. Even the most polished and gleaming crown can crack under the quiet, relentless pressure of what it hides. Transparency, courage, accountability. These are not merely royal duties. They are fundamental human ones. And perhaps that is the true legacy of this entire story. Not the scandal itself, but rather the reminder that it is honesty that makes power truly noble. And that sometimes confronting what we fear most does not weaken us, but on the contrary, saves us.